Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In today's video, I am going to be updating my power rankings following the league's second week of action. However, before I get too far into it, I want to remind you all to leave a like and subscribe. I've been appreciating all the support that I've been receiving lately, and I hope to see that continue. Now, without further ado, let's hop into these power rankings. The biggest risers this week were the Phoenix Suns, who moved up 5 spots, as well as the New York Knicks and the Chicago Bulls, who moved up 4 spots apiece. The biggest fallers were the Minnesota Timberwolves, who dropped 8 spots, the Denver Nuggets, who dropped 5 spots, and a whole bunch of teams who dropped 2 spots each. Into the actual power rankings themselves, at number 1, we have the same team as last week, which a lot of people did disagree with, but I'm sticking with my guns, and we have the Los Angeles Clippers. This week, they beat Minnesota in a blowout, blew out Portland, lost a close one to Utah that honestly was probably the final score was closer than the actual game was. But then they rebounded and beat the Phoenix Suns. Pretty solid week for the Clippers as they lost a game to a good playoff team, beat 2 playoff teams, and blew out a lottery team that they should blow out. Paul George had a nice performance tonight, putting up 39 points and certainly impressed. So the Clippers are going to stay here at number 1 for at least one more week. At number 2, we have the same team as last week as well in the Los Angeles Lakers, who lost a tight one to the Portland Trail Blazers, but then rebounded with a 3-game win streak, 2 against San Antonio, 1 against Memphis. They didn't have any wins that were impressive enough to vault them over the Clippers, but they did take care of business against the lottery teams that were on their schedule, and that's good enough to keep them here at number 2. At number 3, we have our first mover of the week, and that is the Philadelphia 76ers, who moved up 2 spots to reach number 3. They beat Toronto, beat Orlando, and beat Charlotte this week, none of which are particularly impressive wins on their own, but those wins, as well as their impressive start to the season, going 2-1 in week 1, takes them to what, after Phoenix's loss to the Clippers tonight, is the league's best record, and that makes them deserving of being in the top 5, and I've got them here at number 3. At number 4, we have the Milwaukee Bucks, who beat Miami and then lost to Miami in the second night of a back-to-back, as well as beating Chicago this week. In that first Miami game, we saw the Bucks set the NBA record by knocking down 29 three-point shots in what was just a really impressive performance from the Bucks roster as a whole, as 12 of the 13 active players knocked down threes, with the one exception being their best player, Giannis. So that was a great night for the Bucks, and I'm looking for them to continue to build off of it as they enter a pretty weak portion of their schedule where they have a lot of games against the Pistons and the Cavaliers. Hooray! At number 5, we have the first faller of the week in the Brooklyn Nets, who dropped 2 spots to come to this spot. They went 1-3 this week with losses to Memphis, Atlanta, and Washington, as well as a win over Atlanta in what was the first night of a back-to-back against the Hawks. Tonight against Washington was kind of why we are worried about the Nets. They lost a really close game to a team they probably should have beaten, but they allowed 70 points in the first half and 122 for the game as a whole, and that's just not going to get it done for the Nets. They're going to have to improve defensively, and I do think they have the pieces to do that. Kevin Durant is a great defender. Caris LeVert is solid. And outside of that, I guess there really aren't that many great defensive pieces, so maybe there's a move that needs to be made here, but this team certainly does need to improve on the defensive end of the floor. Certainly intriguing returns out of Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant thus far this season, though, as both have been terrific when they've suited up. At number 6, we have the Phoenix Suns, the league's biggest riser this week, as they moved up 5 spots from number 11. In this week, they had an impressive blowout of the New Orleans Pelicans, as well as close wins against Utah and Denver before they finally suffered their first loss of the year against the Clippers tonight. What I've really been impressed with the Suns thus far this season is the outbreak of Mikal Bridges' offensive production. He's always been great for the Suns on the defensive end of the floor, where he's able to take on some very difficult matchups and is also great off the ball because of his length and athleticism. But it appears that he's improved his jump shot this year. He looks really comfortable taking catching shoot shots, and he also has worked on his off the dribble shot as well. So I think that if Mikal Bridges can really establish himself as a good third option as a perimeter scorer for this team, watch out, the Suns are going to be dangerous, and someone that can perhaps be the Nuggets of this year and make a run at the Western Conference Finals. At number 7, we have the Utah Jazz, who stayed put from last week. They beat the Oklahoma City Thunder on a Donovan Mitchell game winner. They lost to the Phoenix Suns wrecking train, and then responded with wins over the Clippers and Spurs to round out the week. Donovan Mitchell has struggled a little bit with his efficiency, although he has improved in recent games. And the fact that they've been able to put up a strong 4-2 record thus far, despite those struggles from their best offensive player, has been impressive. In that win over the Clippers, they got 30-plus points out of Mike Conley, which is definitely what you want to see if you are a Jazz fan. He was a bit of a letdown last season, but if you are getting that top 10 level point guard production out of Mike Conley, that just escalates this team and makes them all that much better if they have that second perimeter scoring option alongside Donovan Mitchell. So that's certainly something to keep your eye on if you are an NBA fan and you are interested to see who could be a surprise championship contender. I'd keep my eye on Mike Conley, because if he's knocking down shots at a high level, it escalates the Jazz and raises their ceiling quite a bit. At number 8, we have another team staying put in the Miami Heat. This week, they split 2 games against the Bucks and then lost a pretty ugly game to the Mavericks, in which they only put up 83 points. The Heat staying put here is mostly a testament to the struggles of the teams beneath them, as overall none of them have been too impressive overall, as we'll get into that a little bit later. But this team has struggled with turnovers thus far, and for that reason, I think that Goran Dragic probably needs to be inserted into the starting lineup at some point, probably sooner than later, because it's really led to Bam Adebayo struggling on the offensive side of the floor. Last year, we saw him have a breakout season, and he made an all-star team with his playmaking capability as a big man. But this year, he's been a bit more turnover prone, and that's because they're asking him to do a bit much more than he's capable of with the ball in his hands. So if you insert a true point guard like Dragic into the starting lineup in the place of Tyler Hero or Duncan Robinson, I think that it would take a large load off of Adebayo and allow him to return to his production levels of last season. Jimmy Butler has also been in and out of the lineup with his ankle sprain, so once he's fully healthy and we can see how this team can gel a little bit more, that also may lead to improved play. At number 9, we have the Boston Celtics, another team that stayed put. They had a 3-1 week, which on the surface level is impressive, but their win against Indiana was mostly just because of Indiana choking the game away. They beat a Memphis team that didn't have Ja Morant or Jaren Jackson Jr., their 2 best players. They lost to an absolutely dreadful Detroit team. And then last night they needed Jason Tatum game winner with 3 seconds left in order to vault themselves past the Pistons. So thus far, this has not been too impressive from the Celtics. Jaylen Brown has really broken out thus far, putting up very impressive point totals on very efficient shooting. But outside of that, and of course Jason Tatum, there hasn't been too much offensive production from the Celtics, and they're going to need more out of the supporting cast in order for them to succeed. Kemba Walker coming back is going to be huge, especially because their best 5 right now includes Daniel Tice and Tristan Thompson, and that's just not a recipe for success. At number 10, we have the Portland Trailblazers, who once again stayed put from last week. The Blazers beat the Lakers this week, which was really impressive and probably the only reason why they didn't end up falling, because outside of that, they got blown out by the Clippers, picked up a solid win over the Warriors, but then just gave up an onslaught of Steph Curry threes this past night. So they're staying put here at 10. Damian Lillard has struggled so far, hasn't been his best stretch of games, but CJ McCollum has picked up the slack and has really impressed with his jump shot focused scoring capabilities, and I've been impressed with how he's looked so far. Perhaps this is the year that he cracks the All-Star team for the first time. At number 11, we have one of the week's biggest fallers in the Denver Nuggets, who dropped here from number 6. They beat the Houston Rockets and then lost to the Sacramento Kings, and then beat the Minnesota Timberwolves this week. Oh no, they lost to the Kings twice? I forget. I wrote in my notes here that they lost to Denver, which obviously did not happen. They did not lose to themselves. I'm an idiot. My apologies. But Denver struggled defensively so far this season. The loss of Jeremy Grant is something that you could certainly point your fingers at in that department, but overall, I'm mostly attributing this to them being a bit rusty and coming off a short break following their late exit in the bubble. Michael Porter Jr. has been pretty good so far in a larger role, as we saw him put up a 30-point night against the Kings in that loss, although it should be pointed out that they didn't have Jamal Murray in that game. And then Porter missed the very next game against the mystery team, who I forgot to write down. But overall, I'm not panicking on the Nuggets. I just thought that their recent string of losses should be reflected in these power rankings, and I had to move them down a little bit here. At number 12, we have the Atlanta Hawks, who moved up 3 spots from number 15 last week. The Hawks were poised to crack into the top 10 on the strength of a close loss to the Brooklyn Nets and then a huge win over the Brooklyn Nets before they completely blew it with a head-scratching loss to the Cavaliers. Trae Young has really had a terrific start to the season. He's getting to the line at a high level, has still knocking down threes and playmaking at the level we know Trae Young is capable of. And with that in combination with the good offensive play thus far of DeAndre Hunter and Bogdan Bogdanovic, we've seen the Hawks be quite successful. I'm not quite ready to bump them into the top 10 because of the inconsistencies shown in that loss to Cleveland, but if they continue winning at this rate, a top 10 ranking is certainly in the works for the Hawks, and I'm sure that will please one of my fans who keeps telling me that I have the Hawks too low in each of these weekly power rankings. At number 13, we have the Houston Rockets. This week, they lost to Denver before bouncing back and beating Sacramento in both nights of a back-to-back. Christian Wood and John Wall have been two, I don't want to say surprises, but at least positive factors for this Nuggets team so far, as they have put up very high-level point totals and have looked pretty good in doing so. Wall struggled with efficiency in his first game, but in his second game just really looked like a high-level ball handler and playmaker and scorer that we've known him to be. This is only from highlights. I didn't actually catch that game against Sacramento, but him combined with Christian Wood and James Harden make this team quite good, and quite honestly, I might have them a bit too low. I moved them up 1 spot from 14th last week to 13th this week, but if they have a nice run, don't be surprised to see them vault themselves into that top 10. Number 14, we have the Indiana Pacers, who moved down from number 12 last week. They lost to the Boston Celtics in a game that they really should have won, but they kind of fell apart in the fourth quarter. They beat the Cavaliers by 20 on New Year's Eve, and then lost to the New York Knicks 2 nights ago in what was a pretty close game. But we've seen terrific performances so far this season from Domantas Sabonis and Malcolm Brogdon. Both of those guys have been giving the Pacers terrific contributions offensively, and Victor Oladipo has looked much closer to his all-star self than his not very good self that we saw post-injury in the bubble last season. If all those guys continue to play well, it bodes well for this Pacers team, but I felt that they had to drop in this rankings after a week in which they went 1-2, and that wasn't even the biggest loss for them, as TJ Warren is now out indefinitely with a foot injury, I believe. So that is certainly not great news for the Pacers, as they were already a little weak at the wing positions following the injury to Jeremy Lamb last season. So they certainly are lacking depth, and they're going to need those guys to get healthy ASAP. Otherwise, this could turn into a bit of trouble for this Pacers team. Number 15, we have the Dallas Mavericks, who dropped 2 spots from number 13 last week. The Mavs lost to the Hornets, and the Bulls, which sandwiched a win over the Heat. I didn't want to overreact too much, despite those being two pretty bad losses, because their best player, Luka Doncic, was out for that Chicago loss, which could be a bit scary, but I've heard that he's likely to play in tomorrow night's game, so, take that for what you will. When Luka's not healthy, obviously this Mavs team is quite a bit worse than 15th, and if he ends up missing extended time, they'll be a huge dropper next week, but I don't really expect that to be the case, and because of that, I'm not going to overreact to one bad week, although it was pretty bad. Luka also has been struggling with his efficiency from the three-point line. I'm not too worried. He's been a bit of a streaky shooter in the past, and I'm sure that we will see him regress back to the mean and start shooting the ball a bit better. At number 16, we have the New Orleans Pelicans, who moved up one spot from last week. This week, they lost to the Phoenix Suns in what was just an absolutely ugly loss, and then came back, blew out Oklahoma City, and picked up a close win over Toronto. This, I believe, is one of the lower-ranked teams with a winning record, but each time I've seen them play, they've just really underwhelmed me. In that Suns game on Monday, or might have been Tuesday night, they just looked really bad. Zion loses track of his matchups defensively all the time. Lonzo Ball and Eric Bledsoe are really the only 2+ defenders on this team, and it certainly shows as they have a chance to get shredded by the opposing front court night in and night out, as we saw against Jay Crowder in that Suns game. So I'm not ready to put the Pelicans in the top half of this rankings, but they ended up moving up this week because the teams around them have just performed that badly. I honestly probably should have moved the Golden State Warriors above them, and the Warriors come in at number 17 this week, moving up 3 spots from number 20. They posted a winning record with wins over Detroit and Portland, sandwiching a loss to Portland. But obviously the biggest storyline here is the performance of Steph Curry last night, putting up 62 points in a 22, I believe, 15-point lead win over the Portland Trailblazers. I was thinking 22 because the Trailblazers put up 122 points. But Curry looked great. Wiggins and Oubre had solid games as secondary scoring options. Draymond Green is back and starting to get healthy, which is going to help this team out. And I would not be surprised to see them continue to climb up the rankings. At number 18, we have the Orlando Magic, who dropped 2 spots following losses to the Philadelphia 76ers and Oklahoma City Thunder this week. I was not really impressed with what I saw from them in that Sixers game, but Nikola Vucevic has been putting up impressive stat lines. I think that he continues to be one of the more underrated players in the NBA, and I hope that the Magic come to their senses and move on from some of these veteran guys, because although they do have a good record at this point and are probably going to be in contention for the play-in, they're never going anywhere further than that with this core, and they should do what they can to accumulate assets and trigger a rebuild around Jonathan Isaac, Markelle Fultz, and Mo Bamba. At number 19, we have the Toronto Raptors, who stayed put from last week. This week, they lost to the Philadelphia 76ers, beat the New York Knicks, and lost to the New Orleans Pelicans. I have yet to see this team play, but from what I've heard, Pascal Siakam has been absolutely dreadful. He's fouled out of back-to-back games. He had to sit out a game because of team rules. I guess he left the bench before the game ended in one of the 2 games that he fouled out in. And when he has been on the court, he hasn't been too effective. He's shooting under 40% from the field and just hasn't been very good overall. I don't know what to say here because I haven't seen him play yet, but certainly something to keep your eye on, as maybe this is a team that could fall out of the playoffs. At number 20, we have the San Antonio Spurs, moving down 2 spots from number 18. This week, they had a pretty difficult schedule, playing the Lakers twice and the Jazz once. They lost all 3 games. The biggest thing to talk about for this team this week, though, was Becky Hammon taking over as the associate head coach following Greg Popovich's ejection in the first night of that Lakers back-to-back. Super great and super fun to see a woman out there as the head coach of an NBA team. Becky Hammon seems to be deserving of a job as the head honcho of a coaching staff, and I think that it will probably be coming for her sooner rather than later. I've always been really impressed when I've heard her interviews, and I think that she's probably going to be a pretty solid coach once she get hired. So congratulations to her, and congratulations to the female gender as a whole, as this is a major step forward towards us seeing more women in places of prominence within NBA teams' structures. At number 21, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers, who moved up 2 spots from number 23 despite having a losing week. They suffered losses to the Knicks and Pacers before bouncing back and beating what had been an impressive Atlanta team. We've seen good performances from Colin Sexton and Andre Drummond so far this year. Their rookie Isaac Okoro has been impressive. All of this is based off stats. Have not yet seen the Cavaliers play. They're not exactly a national TV darling, and I don't have the money to afford League Pass. But if they are on national TV at some point, I'll definitely make a point to watch them play because it sounds like they have a pretty exciting brand of basketball. At number 22, we have the Sacramento Kings. Once again, a team that suffered a losing week but moves up 2 spots because of some losing streaks in this area of the power rankings, but they did beat Denver, which is one of the more impressive wins from the bottom feeders this week before losing both games of a back-to-back to the Rockets. What I want to talk about with this team, though, is their rookie Tyrese Halliburton. Halliburton has shown that he has a lot of glue guy characteristics as a plus defender, a good playmaker, and someone who can knock down an open shot. He's probably not going to win Rookie of the Year, but he might be the best player out of all the rookies this season, if that makes sense. Rookie of the Year usually just goes to the rookie who puts up the most points per game, but Halliburton might have the most positive winning impact on his team this season. And if you're a Kings fan, I would certainly be excited at the prospect of him pairing up with De'Aaron Fox in the backcourt long term. At number 23, we have the Washington Wizards, who dropped 1 spot from last week. I didn't want to overreact. Obviously, losing both games of a back-to-back to the Chicago Bulls is a brutal fate to have. But they did bounce back. They blew out the Timberwolves, and they beat the Brooklyn Nets last night. And I was pretty impressed by what I saw in the Nets game. Russell Westbrook, don't get me started. I've always vouched for this guy, and I've always supported him and said that he is one of the more disrespected players, but stop shooting threes, for the love of God. He attempted like 5 or 6 threes, and I don't think he made a single one. Also, Joe Harris fouled him on a 3, and I just threw my arms up. Why would you ever foul a Russell Westbrook 3-point attempt? But outside of him, I've been impressed with what I've seen from Brad Beal, been impressed with what I've seen from Thomas Bryant, Davis Bertans. The Latvian Laser is always fun to watch, and I think that this Wizards team is probably going to be, at the very least, in contention for the play-in, and quite possibly a team that could get into the top 6 seeds. So I'm not overreacting to the slow start, and I think that this team could end up figuring it out and being pretty good. At number 24, we have the New York Knicks, who are up 4 spots from last week at number 28. This week, they beat the Cavaliers and Pacers and lost to the Raptors in between. Knicks have been playing well recently, and I felt that they needed to move up in the rankings a little bit. RJ Barrett has been inconsistent, but when he's played well, he's been quite good. And Julius Randle has put up some good stat lines as well. So if those aren't empty stats, then maybe the Knicks could be a little bit feisty and see themselves on the borderline of being like a play-in type team. And if you're a Knicks fan, I guess that's all you can ask for after years of being miserable. At number 25, we have the Chicago Bulls, who once again moved up 4 spots from number 29. This week, they beat the Wizards twice, lost to the Bucks in what was an absolute blowout, a drubbing, at the hands of my favorite Milwaukee Bucks, and then beat a Dallas Mavericks team that didn't have Luka Doncic or Kristaps Porzingis. 2 impressive wins over Washington definitely got this team back on the right side of being the worst team in the NBA, but I'm going to need to see quite a bit more. I do want to say, though, impressive night from Zach LaVine in posting 39 points tonight. We'll see if that can stay and continue, and we can see him really be a good first option on a team that maybe wins some games. At number 26, we have the Charlotte Hornets, who stayed put from last week. They had an impressive win over Dallas, although that win looks less and less impressive as Dallas continues to lose to bad teams. And then they had two pretty bad losses to the Grizzlies and the 76ers. I don't know what to think about this team. Terry Rozier has been scoring the ball well. Gordon Hayward has been scoring the ball well. Devontae Graham has been kind of bad. PJ Washington has been kind of bad. I haven't seen them play in like 2 weeks now, but from what I have seen, LaMelo Ball has been quite interesting, and I'm definitely excited to see what the Rookie of the Year race looks like between him, Anthony Edwards, and James Wiseman. At number 27, we have the Oklahoma City Thunder, who moved down 2 spots from number 25. This week, they lost to the Jazz, Magic, and Pelicans before beating the Magic in their last game of the week. Lou Dort has been a positive sign for this Thunder team so far as a major cog in their rebuild, as he's been scoring a little bit, putting up 14 points per game so far this season while playing absolutely suffocating defense. A lot of people have been saying that he's got a shot at being an all defense level defender this season, and I'm all for it. I'm a Lou Dort fan, and I'm excited to see where his career goes from here. At number 28, we have the Memphis Grizzlies, who stayed put from last week. It's pretty much a testament to the fact that this team has been able to win that they stayed put. Ja Morant is a top 50 player in the NBA. Jaren Jackson Jr. is a top 70 player in the NBA, and they have lost both of those guys and are playing without them right now. But they continue to fight, they continue to win games, and that's a testament to how strong the replacements for those two have been in Tyus Jones and Kyle Anderson. And this week, they were able to pick up 2 wins against the Nets and the Hornets, although they did lose 2 games to the Celtics and Lakers. But I've been impressed with this team in the fight they've shown, and if they keep winning, I'll have to move them up. But the roster just isn't very impressive with those guys not healthy, and it's going to take a little bit for them to regain a little bit of stature in these power rankings. At number 29, we have the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are in an absolute free fall after being number 21 last week. They got blown out in all 3 of their games this week against the Clippers, Wizards, and the Nuggets. And going back to last week, they got crushed by the Lakers as well. All of that coincided with Karl Anthony Towns going down with an injury. And until he gets healthy, this team is really a bottom feeder. And I would not be looking for them to move up in these rankings as long as Cat is out. Finally, at number 30, we have a team staying put from last week, and that is the Detroit Pistons. The Pistons actually picked up a win when they beat the Celtics, but outside of that, they are 1-5 on the season and haven't seen a whole lot of positives. Jeremy Grant has been looking a bit better than expected. I was really critical of that signing, but perhaps it'll end up looking a bit better if he can at least be competent as a primary scoring option. I'm not expecting it, but it looks like it might be what he is. Not too much else to say about the Pistons. I did watch their game against the Celtics today, and I liked what I saw from 2 of the 3 rookies in Saddiq Bey and Isaiah Stewart. Didn't see a whole lot of Killian Hayes, but apparently he's been really bad. I just haven't seen enough to formulate an opinion so far. But those are the power rankings here. Let me know what you thought in the comments section down below. Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? Let me know. Like and subscribe if you did enjoy this video. And, well, that's going to be it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, see you all again very soon.